Spirit of life, let us dwell in anticipation. Let us marvel at things in bud, hopes and growth and blossoms and selves. Help us to see each day as a new beginning, a day for starting over, a day for letting go, a day for healing, a day for embracing joy. As we take this time for silence to hold tightly in our embrace all those who are hurting or grieving, including ourselves, let us also use this silence to recognize what is in bud within ourselves. Let us use this silence to nourish and fertilize that potential, so that in time we may bloom. Amen. I have two friends, twin sisters, who are folk singers. They are Chris and Meredith Thompson. And while they don't play around here too much anymore, for a while they were doing a lot of gigs in and around Boston and the Cape. Often at coffee houses housed in Unitarian Universalist churches. Chris and Meredith grew up Baptist, fed by the soulful music of their church. But they have some UU affinities and feel quite at home in our churches when they sing there. They get a real kick out of reading all the posters and notices and children's religious education projects on the walls as they wait for their performances to start. At one UU church, they saw on the wall a series of children's letters to God, which they often talk about as an introduction to one of their songs. Although all of the letters were very dear, two stuck out to them as memorable. One, which became the inspiration for their song Lines of Longitude, read, "Dear God, who drew the lines around the countries?" Another one read, "Dear God, thank you for my little brother. But what I really asked for was a puppy." I love reading and thinking about these letters, and I know that others must too, because there are now several books out there that consist entirely of children's letters to God. Children have a brilliant way of getting right to the point. They have a natural curiosity, gratitude, and a sense of awe that make their letters so poignant. But they also don't have the baggage that we adults have when thinking about the word God. They don't have to think for so long before writing the greeting to their letters about whether they are comfortable using the word God or whether they would rather address their questions or thanks to Spirit of Life, that which is holy, or Earth Mother. I have a feeling that if many of us were asked to write a letter to God, it might start with a preamble, which says, "Dear God, I am a humanist and therefore don't really believe in you, but here goes." And although I am a lover of words, a proponent of inclusive language, and a spiritual humanist myself, I also sometimes have the yearning to sit down and compose a letter about the big things in life, gratitude and questions and frustrations, without the preamble. I'd like for all of us to be able to write our letters to whatever we see as bigger than ourselves or beyond ourselves, without self-consciousness or limitation. And if we were all able to get beyond the language of the greeting in order to really write about what was on our hearts. I think it might be a comfort to us. Until the problem arises of where to mail it, of course. And Unitarians are not the only ones who might struggle with the idea of where one would send a letter to God. Even religions with more uniform theologies have diverse beliefs about the address of God and the best means of getting word to her. And so I was struck by a segment I heard on National Public Radio a while back, which featured an interview with Avi Yanif, a postal worker in Israel, and the unexpected recipient of many such letters. Avi heads the Department of Dead Letters in Jerusalem. A dead letter is mail that can't be delivered or returned. The Israeli Postal Company receives about 2,000 letters to God every year. 65-year-old Avi has been working there for almost a decade. He says the post office has been getting these kinds of letters for as long as anyone can remember. Some are from Jews, but not the majority. The letters are from people of all faiths, from all over the world. Avi points to letters from Germany, Mexico, Uzbekistan, Kenya, and the United States. How do the letters end up with him, he is asked. God has an address, says Avi. Do you know address of God? No. When somebody writes to God, we think that he wanted in the beginning that this letter should arrive to Jerusalem. We think Jerusalem is the most holy city in the world. And so, while officially God has no address, the mail will be received in Jerusalem, and sometimes read. Avi picks up a letter from the stack. This is from Malaysia, he says. To God, I want to win the big sweeps this July 30th, and these are the numbers of the lottery: 1, 15, 19, 36, 42, 14. But not everyone is writing to God for a winning lotto ticket. Avi reads another letter. Dear God, I want my son home with me. He left on September 28th and hasn't returned home, and he hasn't phoned me. And another. Dear God, I am writing to tell you about the pain I feel inside. I am so hurt and confused. The interviewer asks, the things that people have been writing to God, have they stayed the same over the past 10 years since you've been opening these letters? Or have things changed? Avi's response, I think there is nothing new. Forgiveness, peace between relatives, it's the same ideas that come in all the letters. The interviewer asks if Avi feels guilty reading the letters. He doesn't. And people who learn of his role in opening the Dear God letters don't seem to mind either. Whenever there's a story published about him in the international press, Avi's office gets another flurry of letters. Even in the note, says Avi, some people write to Avi Yanif, because I am the address they know. This makes sense to me. As someone who sees the universe as the Holy One, and the people in it as part of that holiness, it makes sense to me that my letter to God would end up in the hands of Avi Yanif. In my theology, our hands are the only hands God has. Here is another story. This one comes from Christian theologian Howard Thurman. One day, Thurman's young son was sick and wanted some nurturing. Howard Thurman, drawing on all of his ministerial wisdom, told his son that God was always with him, always loving him. His young son replied, "But I want someone with skin to love me and take care of me." And that makes sense to me too. I don't know whose name is closest to describing God, but I do know that the way I experience God is in my connection to others and to the earth. And so each time I am loved or taken care of by someone with skin, it tells me something about the goodness of God, or the holy, or the universe. To me, it matters how we interact with one another, because our interactions say something not just about ourselves, but about the nature of things. Sometimes I worry when I take a look at the world around me and all the pain and violence I see, that if the universe is God, including humankind, then maybe God is not good. But more often, I take a look around and see things like the beauty of the changing season as the leaves and blossoms explode on branches seemingly overnight. Or I read my sister's website, where people have left her inspiring notes as she has battled cancer and its aftermath. Or I attend a meeting of a caring community at a church, where schedules are drawn up for who might bring flowers to someone who has just suffered a loss, and who else might be able to drive an elderly parishioner to a doctor's appointment, or make some soup for someone who is housebound. And I see those things, and I am reassured that though there is hardship in this world, the goodness and the light still outshine the darkness. I am reassured that God, if you can call it that, is good. And so I am touched by the care that Avi takes with those letters. It's tradition for worshipers at the Western Wall in Jerusalem to write their prayers on small slips of paper and stick them between the stones. So every 6 months, Avi and his crew take God's letters to the wall and wedge them in the cracks. Avi figures it's the closest thing to God's mailbox. And each time he goes to the wall, he also tucks in a note from himself. I know that people in this church believe a diversity of things about the holy, and some consider themselves spiritual and some do not. Some are comfortable with the word God and some are not. But somehow, you all end up here in community each Sunday. Some come for the music, some the prayer, some the dedication of this group to social justice. I think we all come here because being together tells us something about the world that is good, and we need that. And sometimes we also need to share our concerns and hopes and grief and joy with something larger than this community, something beyond ourselves. So I invite you all to try out the practice of writing a letter to God. And if that doesn't feel right to you, maybe you can just sit down and compose a few words to Avi. We opened this morning with a reading by Nancy Schaefer. I'd like to close with one. Somehow her words just seem to tie all mine together. This reading is called Prayer for This Church. May each one among us have skin that longs to touch other skin, fingertips that long for other fingertips, or whole hands and even arms, bodies that want to stand next to other bodies, not alone, while singing and bending, stirring soup. May ones whose skin does not cry out for other skin wish it did, and so teach it, so that no one stands alone and no one aches and does not say so. May our doors be so open it is drafty inside, and people sometimes shout because noises without come also within. May those sheltered here sometimes cry all at once, letting tear water clean what words by themselves cannot. In silent times, may everyone present hear everyone else breathing and know that this is not separate from how the world breathes all night. May we always have enough room for those many who want to come in. May those who cherish this church be so glad they cannot stop speaking, stop asking, and may that crowding itself be a gladness as we keep adding rooms. May we notice each one who is new and invite her to stay. May our list of names for the holy not ever be finished, and may we hear God chuckling with us as we find still more. Amen, and blessed be.